Radio check. Anybody copy? Hi everyone, I'm Alice Cunningham, and this is episode 5, Art and Cultural Appropriation on Coffee and Clock. Coffee and Clock is a podcast I created to celebrate and explore contemporary native life in urban Alaska. I had a question brought up this week about Coffee and Clock's opening tagline, Radio check. Anybody copy? And it occurred to me that some folks probably have no idea what that tagline refers to or where it even came from. I know most of my rural listeners probably have an idea of where it comes from, but I guess I should fill everyone else in. If you grew up in the village, then you probably had a VHF radio in your house or in your vehicle or in your boat. And they're used to communicate with other people, sometimes the next house down or with people out hunting or camping. Ours at home sits right next to a big window in the living room. Anyway, if you aren't sure your VHF radio is working, or you just really want to play around on the VHF, or you want to hear someone acknowledge your existence, you send out the message, Radio check, anybody copy? And if your radio is working correctly, someone over the airwaves will respond with, loud and clear, back to 6-8. Or your auntie will swat you and tell you to quit playing on the VHF. Either way, the message served its purpose. So, if you all feel so inclined to acknowledge Coffee and Clock's existence, feel free to send us a fitting message back on social media, such as loud and clear, or hey, Connie, quit playing on the radio, I'm going to tell your mom, or back to 6-8. Anyway, back to the show. This week we explore the concept of cultural appropriation in relation to the Alaska Native arts world. We have some amazing badass guests. Melissa Shagnoff, who is an artist and curator of contemporary and indigenous art and culture at the Anchorage Museum, and Crystal Worrell, who is an artist and co-founder of Trickster. Trickster is a company that promotes indigenous and innovative designs. Both of these women are active and accomplished artists, but also support other Native artists and work in the art industry. How they had time to meet up with Coffee and Clock, I have no idea, but I am super stoked to share their insight and perspectives on art and cultural appropriation. What is cultural appropriation? Is there a difference between appropriation and inspiration? Is there a relationship between cultural appropriation and stereotypes? And if so, how does this impact Alaska Native culture and Alaska Native artists? These were some of the questions that guided this discussion. Our guests, again, are Melissa Shagnoff, who is Ahtna Athabaskan and Paiute, and Crystal Worrell, who is Tlingit, Yupik, and Athabaskan. Here they introduce themselves and the work that they do.
I'm from Nait-Dinyana, the log over the river, Chickalin, Alaska. I grew up on the Kenai Peninsula, though, so I'm Ahtna Athabaskan. I'm also Paiute, so I was actually born on the Pyramid Lake Reservation in Nevada, but I only lived there for about a couple months of my life, and then my folks moved back to Alaska because they grew up in Alaska. So I'm Athabaskan and Paiute. I'm Udishu and Koyakutta. I'm Caribou and Fish Eater Clan. And I'm curator and artist. So I'm Golgeshna. I'm the curator of contemporary indigenous art and culture at the Anchorage Museum. And I'm an artist. I had my first solo show at Bunnell Street Art Center in Homer. It's entitled How Much, and it's up for the month of August. Yeah, it's a collection of paintings and an installative sort of conceptual piece. It's kind of all about sort of this transition of work that I've been doing from being solely an artist to being a curator and working within institutions, and how that changes my perspective on things and how I see art in general. You know, I think that as a young Indigenous person, you hold many hats and you wear many hats in your community. Starting work at the museum, it was just a whole nother layer, a whole nother persona and hat that I had to wear. You know, this idea of, so like the Latin term for curator is like the idea to care, right? It's to care for something. I really took that to heart because I think that as a curator, you're given this power of decision, of deciding kind of like what's put out there and what's available for people to absorb and see. And it's this idea of deciding, and that you have some sort of hierarchy in those decisions and power. For me, it's really about creating spaces for Indigenous people to speak for themselves and to be more of a facilitator than a curator, and to just help guide as much as I can. Because the institutions and museums, they have a plethora of information, of collections, of access to things. I just see my role as helping Indigenous people gain access to those places and to make space for someone to come after me.
And Crystal.
Ka kia yu khat du sok yech ayachat luka hadi na khatsati asna daka hidi yech hit shangu khidi yadi ayachat gonana na khatsati. Hello, my English name is Crystal Rose Dementive Whirl, and my Tlingit name is Ka Kia. I am Tlingit, Athabaskan, and Yupik, and I am from Fairbanks and Juneau, Alaska. And my brother Rico Whirl and I are co-owner of Trickster Company. We are an innovative Indigenous graphic design and art gift shop located in Juneau, Alaska. Being able to do art and make my living, being a self-supporting artist, is the blessing, it's a challenge. There's lots of pros and cons. I'd have to say probably the most incredible thing about it, though, is how it connects me to my family, my clan, my people. I'm Tlingit, Athabaskan, and Yupik, and all of my art explores a connection with my identity, or a connection with the land where I'm from, or a connection with the food, my ancestors' food, our food, seal, blueberries. A lot of earth is included in my components of art, like blueberries. Sometimes I'll pick blueberries from Juneau, crush them, and paint with them. Fish skin. One fish could feed me and my family, and I could use its skin for art. And so art literally has this circular connection with my life, my community, my family, my people. And living in Alaska, it's an important place. So it's placement and time and my identity. That's why art is so important to me.
Humans have been exchanging information probably since we could communicate. Why, then, is some of this exchange considered negative or cultural appropriation? First, I asked Melissa and Crystal to define what cultural appropriation is.
The basic definition of cultural appropriation is when sort of the majority or the people in power take or adopt aspects of minority culture without context or consent from that culture. And that happens in many forms. Cultural appropriation, I think people think of it in a very narrow sort of mind, and it's so broad. It happens all the time. We have to find ways, being in positions of power and positions of access and visibility, to make aware or to give Indigenous people the platform to speak and represent their own work. Cultural appropriation, it becomes such an issue because you have people who don't come from that history, don't come from that context, don't come from that understanding, trying to adopt something that isn't theirs, that doesn't belong to them. For me as an artist, it's really about inequity, right? It's about, representation. We have many artists, today who are rising in the art world, who are becoming more and more known in quotations, but just visible, really, who are getting the props that has been, deserved for a long time. And, as we do that, we're given the opportunity to represent our own experience. And it shouldn't be taken and it shouldn't be represented in inspiration or interpretation. Cultural appropriators take space that's meant for Indigenous people, space in which they misrepresent, misinterpret, or misunderstand an experience that's not their own. And this reinforces all those stereotypes, right? It reinforces this misconception of what Indigenous art looks like, or what Indigenous people experience or understand. And those stereotypes, it's a problem. It's a problem when you see these things being perpetuated and viewed. That's where the issues come in, into play. It's because you have these sort of roles being given to you without any control over that story, and we really have the ability and should be given the space to talk about our own experiences, and I think cultural appropriation stops us from doing that. Cultural appropriation represents us and takes up space for us that we have no control over and no autonomy.
I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I own a business that's online, and I do a lot of research looking at other businesses and clothing and other entrepreneurs online. And it's something I see again and again happen, appropriation, or someone who's non-native doing native design or native-inspired clothing. And there's a whole spectrum of appropriation. Someone who is drawing a design that's native-inspired, someone who replicated a native design, or, to the extreme level of dressing up as Pocahontas for Halloween or wearing a headdress at Coachella. There's all the extremes of appropriation that I see on a daily basis, especially with social media being so quick and accessible. And that's an important part of me being an artist and an entrepreneur, is to teach people, educate people about when is it okay to wear something with native design on it, and when is it maybe not okay, or maybe you should think about that before you tattoo that on your body. So part of my job as an artist is helping inform people and also encouraging people to support native art from native artists. Mm-hmm. I get challenged all the time. People ask me, well, how are you not appropriating non-native culture when you do certain things? My answer, it's never easy, but when a historically oppressed group of people have something taken from them again and again and again, and someone outside of that group who is not from the same group of those people, and they take it as their own and use it, that's, to me, is cultural appropriation. It has a different meaning, and it's not cultural appropriation for a native person to make leggings. Leggings are a modern design. On that note, that's probably one of the number one questions I get asked again and again by our customers or friends who are non-native and perspectives who want to support Trickster Company, but they also want to not culturally appropriate. So the question I get asked all the time is, I'm non-native, I love clothing designed by native artists, especially Trickster Company. Is it cultural appropriation if I purchase Trickster Company leggings and wear them? And I love that people are thoughtful enough to ask that question, because that is the number one question I get asked all the time. And I always say, that's a great question. One of the missions of Trickster Company is to support Indigenous artists, art made by Indigenous people, and also create a platform where natives and non-native people could feel they could come and shop and wear with pride native design on clothing or on products, and feel that it's appropriate and feel that they're supporting a good cause. It is so easy just to buy some knockoff, non-native design, native-inspired apparel on, I see ads on Instagram and my Facebook that pop up on my feed all the time. And it's just so super easy to click a button and order it. And they're affordable, they're cheap, because they're not like designer clothing. Mm-hmm. So when I tell people, not only are you buying from a native artist, you're helping perpetuate a healthy income for Indigenous artists, which is what we've always done. We've always existed as artists. Before artist was even a term, we were artists as a living. And we're still using our art to this day to make a living, but in a modern context. And there are healthy ways in which non-native people can wear a native design with pride. And that's them supporting native artists. I always tell people, when they feel they want that reassurance from shopping from me, I always tell them, asking that question is a step forward, and that's incredible that you would ask that. And You can take it a step further, buy from a native artist and wear that design, wear it with pride, honor it, and share the word